Thank you for that lovely, lovely introduction. Hi. As Herb was saying, last year I was here to talk to you about how important it is for us to create experiences that empower people, that aren't just usable, but that go beyond being usable to empowering them. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how we need to consider not just the short-term impacts of these experiences that we create, because these experiences could be empowering in the here and now and not so long-term, but that we should be considering the whole-term impacts of the experiences that we create. So, to get started, how many of you know what this is? Anyone? Specifically, this point on the graph. That is the point at which Facebook knows that you have gone into a new relationship, that you've started a new relationship, regardless of whether or not you have told Facebook that you have done this, right? How do they know that you've started a new relationship? It's because of these little black dots. Those little black dots represent the number of timeline posts between you and another person. And the x-axis there is time in days. So that's 100 days leading up to when you go into a new relationship. So what I find fascinating is at which point within those 100 days does Facebook know that you're about to start a new relationship? Is it before you yourself? No. And, perhaps more importantly, who owns this data? Who owns this intelligence about you? So Facebook released this as part of a blog post, and somebody actually asked that very question there. They said, will you be releasing this data publicly? And Facebook replied saying, sorry, we don't even release anonymized data to the public. So who owns this data? In this case, it's very clear. Facebook owns this intelligence and this data about you. So if you've been following Facebook recently, they bought messaging application WhatsApp for a whopping $19 billion. Why did they pay $19 billion for this messaging application? What did they really buy to understand their motivations? What they actually bought were the telephone numbers of 450 million, now over 500 million people. But perhaps even more importantly, the right to listen in on all of their future conversations and the right to have all of that data. So you might say, Aral, so what? That's fine. It's just a service, right? If I don't like what Facebook are doing, I can stop using Facebook. I beg to differ. I believe that the relationship that we have with computers has altered fundamentally within the last 30 to 40 years. Computers used to be these cold, external devices. They were impersonal, right? We had to drive to one to use it. Today, we wear them on our persons. We wake up with our cell phones. We go to bed with our cell phones. You don't get more personal than that. There was a time when computers were disconnected from both the world around them and from each other. Today, via a plethora of sensors, they are always listening, they're always hearing, they're always on. Today, it's not too much of a stretch to say that we have become cyborgs. Not in that we actually extend our bodies, that we implant our bodies with technology, but in that we extend our biological capabilities through technology. And technology, increasingly, is the means by which we both manipulate the world around us and experience the world around us. Technology is a filter and an enabler. And whether or not our tools work well, that's what determines whether they empower us or whether they enfeeble us. So these tools are no longer optional. They are essential to modern life. So the question really then becomes, who owns our tools? And the answer to that today is a handful of companies. And they all share a common characteristic. They're all closed silos. And a subset of these companies also shares a business model, the business model of free. So you might say, Aral, so what? Free's great. What's wrong with free? Everybody loves free stuff, right? Do you guys love free stuff? Who doesn't love free stuff? Yeah, yeah, we love free stuff. Have I got a startup to tell you about? All right, wait for this. I'm very excited about this. It's called Schnail Mail, right? And you guys are going to love Schnail Mail, all right? Because with Schnail Mail, we have solved a very important problem. We have solved the problem of real mail. That's right. Schnail Mail will give you free, real mail forever. Send as many letters as you want, as many packages as you want, to as many people as you want, anywhere in the world, for free, forever. Who thinks this is a great idea? Who would use Schnail Mail, right? Would Schnail Mail have won the startup competition here? I think so. Now, there is a caveat. You know, we do open your letters, and we do read through them, but we only do this so that we can provide you with some helpful hints and suggestions based on what we've understood, which may be right, which may be wrong. But then don't worry, because we just put all of that back in the envelope, and you wouldn't even know that we were ever there, right? So who still thinks it's a great idea? Who'd still use Schnail Mail? There's always one. I'm waiting for that person. There you are, sir. Thank you very much. That has never failed me. It's free. I will use it. The rest of you use Gmail, right? Now, there might not be a person reading through each of your letters, but there is a computer. There is an algorithm reading everything that you write there. So that's Schnail Mail. I do hope you tell your friends about Schnail Mail. It's at schnailmail.com, and they can find out about this amazing new startup that we have. So why does Google do this? Are they evil? Is there a comic book-like lab somewhere where they stand around laughing, you know? No. No, it's very, very simple. They do this because it is their business model. You don't need the complexity of conspiracy theories when you have the simplicity of business models. It is their business model to monetize your data. So just like the mutant plant from outer space in the musical Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey 2, that starts off as a little sapling that needs drops of blood to grow and then ends up eating whole human beings, Google simply needs your data to grow. That is what it feeds on. That is what it monetizes. And how does it get your data? Well, services, that's where we begin. That's where Google began. Google was a sapling at one point, right? It was just a search engine. Back then, they didn't even track you. They stumbled onto their business model later on. But today, Google is a very different beast, right? It has a plethora of services. From anything from, do you want to put all of your files somewhere? Put them on Google Drive. Will Google look through all of those files to understand you better? Of course they will. Why? Because it's their business model. Do you want to put all your pictures somewhere? Put them on Picasa. Will they be running facial recognition, etc., to understand who you are, who your friends are? Of course. Do you want to interact with your friends? Go on Google+. Will they then have your social graph? Yes. And then will they combine all of this information? Yes. Do you want to communicate with your friends? Use Google Chat, use Google Hangouts, use Google Mail. We talked about Google Mail, right, at the beginning? When you use Google Mail, you might tell me, well, Aral, it's fine. You know what? I understand this. It's my decision, and I'm okay with Google reading my mail because I get a valuable service back. But you haven't only made that decision for yourself. It's not just a selfish decision, because you've also made it for everyone else who emails you, because they also get to read their email. And imagine if you're using, for example, a custom domain, then they may not even know that Google gets to read through their email, and you've made that decision for them as well. So how else do they get data? Well, there are games. reCAPTCHA. Who's heard of reCAPTCHA? Who's seen it on a form somewhere? It's a great service, isn't it? You go on a form on a website. It protects the website by trying to ascertain whether you're human or not, right? So you have to enter these 2 words, or sometimes it's a word and a photograph of a door with a number on it, and you have to read the number. So what's happening here? It's a game. It says, well, we're protecting this website, but we want you to do something for us as well. And they're very explicit about that as well. They're very transparent about it. So you are helping here Google read the books that it has scanned in, where there are words that it doesn't know how to read. You're telling it, teaching it how to read that, while it's giving you a service. Or you're telling it how to read the numbers on doors for Street View. And there are actual games as well. There's a game called Ingress. Has anyone played it here? No, yeah, a couple of people? Awesome. Wow, lots of Ingress players. That's not common. You walk around the world in teams. You're playing in teams, right? And you have to find certain landmarks, and you have to hack into these landmarks. And it's a free game. It's free. You download it, it's free, you play it, right? It's great. But what you're really doing as you're walking around is you're giving Google very hard to come by data on pedestrian walking patterns. So in a sense, it is like releasing lab rats into a maze and kind of going, run, let me see how you do this. Let me learn from that, right? And you're there going, it's a fun game. This is really a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun right now. But then you might say, Aral, oh my gosh, okay, these services, wow, you scared us, all right? I'm not going to use them. And then what happens? Google loses data, right? And they can't do that. That's how they make money. So what's the next step? They give you devices. They give you beautiful, beautiful experiences. But what are these experiences? So think about a Nexus phone. It's a gorgeous phone, and it's half the price of an iPhone. My gosh, it's like I'm doing their advertising for them, right? Why is it half the price of an iPhone? Does Google have twice the economies of scale of Apple? I mean, Tim Cook is meant to be a supply chain guy. Is he asleep at the wheel? How can they sell this phone for half the price? They can because it's a subsidized product. What this beautiful phone is a gorgeous data entry device for you to be able to tell Google about yourself and about what you're doing. The same with their tablets, the same with their Chromebooks. Because what you do there is if you give someone a device, remember, with services, you can say, I'm not going to use them, and they've lost. With a device, you make the person sign in to their device, their Google username and password. And at that point, it doesn't matter what service you use. They will still get some valuable data. And that's in line with their business plan. Now, you might say, okay, whoa, that's it. I'm not going to use their devices. Darn it. They've lost. They can't lose. What's the next step? What do? If our business model is monetizing data, what's our end game? Our end game is to provide people with connectivity. So if I can make your sign-in to the internet your Google username and password, then it doesn't matter what device you use, I will still get valuable data from you. And that's what Google's trying to do with Google Fiber, right? Sign in with your username and password, your Google username and password, please. But what about the next 5 billion? We love talking about the next 5 billion, right? We have to save these people. Their greatest pressing urgency is that they cannot get on the internet, right? So how do we save the next 5 billion? Well, with Google, it's with balloons, right? Project Loon. They actually called it Project Loon. It is to provide internet connectivity via balloons, right? So it's not inconceivable that in the future there might be a whole nation of people whose only experience of the internet is a thing that you sign into with your Google username or password, or the same with Facebook, with internet.org. Their only experience could be that you have to sign into the internet with your Facebook username and password. I don't know about you guys, but there's something a little neo-colonial about that when I think about it. So that's Google trying to know about you. But there's another aspect. Google also needs to know about the world, right? Because there's a lot of valuable data there. How does it do that? Well, there is, of course, Google Earth, satellite imagery. There is Google Maps, right? And then there is Google Street View as well. And I'm sure you all know how they capture the street view photographs, right? With the street view car, you all know about the street view car, you've probably seen it, you've probably done silly things in front of it, right? But there are places where the street view car cannot go. That's why we have the street view trike. We need that data, people. And if the trike can't get there, there's the street view snowmobile. But the snowmobile can't go indoors, so there is the street view trolley. And if you can't get there with a trolley, by gosh, there is the street view backpack. But there's still a few places where you wouldn't let Google go, even if they came sporting a backpack with this weird thing protruding out of it, or maybe because of that. One of those places might be your workplace. Another one of those places might be your home. So that's why they need you. I don't know how many of you have heard of their latest project, Project Tango. So Project Tango is a phone that has built-in depth sensing and motion tracking, so that when you're walking around with this phone in your home or in your workplace, it is mapping out your interior space in 3D. Not only that, it's also recognizing the objects around it, etc. Because again, you wouldn't let Street View into your home, but you'll let yourself, so they'll let you buy a phone where you can give them that data, and that's Project Tango in a nutshell. So again, there is a slight character of the lab rats emerging, where you are the lab rat. So just like Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors needs blood to grow, free services, it's not just Google, need your data to grow. It's just their business model, monetizing data. That's how they make their money. In other words, their business model is to spy on you. The business model of free services is the business model of corporate surveillance. So you might have heard the saying, if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product being sold. I prefer you are the quarry being mined. You are the livestock being farmed. You are the new natural resources, all of us. But our data, our individual data points, they are just natural resources. They're not even the most valuable bit of the equation. It's when you combine these to create a profile of you. Now, that's really valuable. Just like with mining, the raw materials, that's your data. That's not the most valuable bit. It's the value that we gain from that that's so much more valuable. Why? Think about it. I can't take you and I can't put you in a lab and I can't prod you and study you and psychoanalyze you 24 hours a day because we have laws against that sort of thing, right? Your corporeal self is protected by laws. But what if I can simulate you? What if I can create a profile of you? What if I can create a simulation, a digital self, a virtual self, what I call a sim? I can take that sim and I can put that sim inside my laboratory and I can psychoanalyze it and I can prod it 24 hours a day to learn what makes you tick. What are your fears? What are your desires? What are your motivations? What are your addictions? And then I can use that knowledge to make money, right? The end goal of all of us who do design really is a theoretical device that I call the experience machine. The experience machine is a very simple device. It simply knows everything about the world, it knows everything about you, and it can read your mind. Now, if we could build this, we could all go home today. Our work here is done, right? Eric Schmidt, on this line of reasoning, said, we know where you are, we know where you've been, we can more or less know what you're thinking. Now, that was, I believe, in 2011 or 2010, so that's about 4 or 5 years ago, a lifetime in internet time. So you might say, Aral, so what? You know what? Even so, these services respect my privacy, right? If I go on Facebook, there's a privacy settings screen, and I can set the privacy exactly as I want it. Not really, and definitely not after 9/11. After 9/11, in the United States, they set up the Information Awareness Office with the explicit goal of reaching total information awareness, awareness about everyone and everything. This was their actual logo. I kid you not, right? If you're going to set up an agency with that sort of a goal, do not make this your logo. People get scared. They do a huge pyramid with an all-seeing eye shooting lasers at the world. Don't do that. That's not a great idea, right? So what happened? People got scared. And they said, oh, no, we're not doing that anymore. We've shut it down. And of course, last year, with whistleblower Edward Snowden's revelations, we now know that the NSA really needs to hire a PowerPoint designer. They really do. But beyond that, we know that all of these companies that we trusted to keep our data private were actually sharing it with the US government and with other governments, including our own, with GCHQ. What were they sharing? Everything. Everything that we thought was private. Why? Because it's so much easier once you volunteered this data yourself to a third party for the government to come where it's all stored in one place and say, give it to us. It's not under the same legal protections anymore, and it's cheap. It is so cheap for them to do it. It's pennies on the person. If they had to go out and surveil each one of you separately, it would be too expensive. They couldn't carry out dragnet surveillance if it was that expensive. It's like Bruce Schneier, the security expert and cryptographer. He says, the NSA didn't wake up and say, let's just spy on everybody. They said, hey, the corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get in on the game, right? So if that's the case, these companies and the people who run them must really care about your privacy. So let's go back to Eric Schmidt, the ex-CEO and executive chairman of Google, and see what he thinks. He says about this subject, he says, there's been surveillance for years. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. It's the nature of our society. So Eric, what should we do?
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
I'll let that sink in. So if you have something you don't want everyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Why didn't we think about this, right? It's so simple. But I have to give it to him. Eric is a stand-up guy. He didn't just say this. He wanted to prove to the world that this was the way it was. So he took some of his own personal images, some of his own personal videos, and he created a couple of websites. I want to share with you some of my favorite ones. Starting with Eric's toiletsantics.com. That's a very interesting site, some very interesting videos, personal videos and photos he posted there. There's Eric's favorite sexytimes.com. You'll never believe what he gets up to. And my favorite, ericsmasturbationadventures.com. Some of you don't know whether to laugh. Now, of course, these websites don't exist, and nor should they for any developers in the house. Because privacy is not about whether or not you have something to hide. Privacy is about having the choice about what you want to keep to yourself and what you want to share with others. It is a fundamental human right that we've enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for a reason. It is the bedrock upon which our civil liberties and our human rights rest. Privacy is an essential prerequisite for both of those things. So with their business models of free, companies like Google and other companies that share their business model are emerging as great threats to our civil liberties and to our human rights. So free is a lie. It's a lie because it's a concealed barter. There is a barter happening. You are just not told about it. There is an exchange of value. You are just not told about it. So it is really a con. It is the textbook definition of a confidence trick. The act of cheating or tricking someone by gaining their confidence and their trust and persuading them to believe that something is not true. So, in the words of a Facebook product manager, he says, now we're thinking about privacy as a set of experiences that help people feel comfortable. Comfortable with what, you might ask? Comfortable with the fact that they don't have privacy. In other words, a con. But it's more dangerous than that because it's a monopoly. This business model is a monopoly on the internet today. So Google might say, if you don't like us, use Yahoo. What's Yahoo's business model? Oops, corporate surveillance, monetizing your data. Use LinkedIn. What's their business model? Same. Use Snapchat. What's their business model? Pick your Silicon Valley darling of the week. Their business model will be corporate surveillance. In fact, we even heard from one such company today in the morning. You might not know it because the presenter did not actually dwell on that subject at all. But we saw about this beautiful product called Spritz, right? And it was excellent, wasn't it? I mean, the video, it's so cool. So much potential, right? Such an excellent experience. What we didn't hear about is their business model. What's their business model? Their business model is to learn about what you're reading, is to watch you as you're reading and monetize that data. The beauty of it is, if I give you a web page, I don't know which parts you've read and which parts you haven't read. With Spritz, they know exactly what you're reading. So that SDK that you have to sign into their account. So the goal is to get as many people to use this SDK. They mentioned, I believe, an email application. Let's build it into an email application. Then who gets to read your data? Right? Who gets to read your letters? Spritz does, right? And we also saw that there are applications of this in the here and now that are hugely empowering, right? The story about dyslexia, I mean, that is so awesome, such potential. But you remember Google Project Tango, right? In their product video, this is what they say.
Use it for visually impaired, give them auditory cues on where they're going.
That's great. Project Tango can be used for that as well. But what's their actual business model? What's the reason they're really doing it? It's not for that. And similarly, for Spritz, it's not for that, right? The real reason is to get as much data information about you so that you can monetize that. And I believe that these people deserve better, that you deserve better, and humanity deserves better than this monopoly of this myopic business model. So, the monopoly of free is leading us down a path that I call digital feudalism. Digital feudalism is an end result where we don't have the option even of owning our own tools and our data. These things that we experience and manipulate life with, we have to rent them from corporations. So that's the problem. If you want to know more about the problem, there's a great documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply that I hugely recommend that you watch. It's on iTunes and it's on Netflix. But if we leave it there, it's a very, very depressing place to leave it, right? Thank you, Aral. You've depressed us. Great. The world sucks. We can all go home now. No. So what's the alternative? The alternative, of course, is open, right? Open solutions will save us. Well, not quite, because open doesn't mean what you think it means. Open has been so overloaded as a term that it has become, in effect, meaningless. So I would rather use the word free. You might be going, what? You just told us free's a lie and it's terrible. Yes, it's the English language. We have a problem. I mean free as in liberty. Free as in freedom free, okay? And it's easy. It's so easy. These free solutions are so easy. I'm going to take you through it in 3 steps. Number 1, clone the Git repository of an open source Google or Facebook alternative. All right, you all with me? We can all do this, right? Number 2, configure and deploy it to your own server. We all have our own servers somewhere, and we know how to protect them. And number 3, just get all of your friends to do the same, and we've solved this problem. It's not easy. And that is the problem, right? Even though something is open, even though something is free, it might be closed or inaccessible to some people. The problem is one, again, of experience. So this really is a talk on design, right? Let's look at the darling of the open web, Mozilla, and their operating system, Firefox OS. So I got myself a Firefox OS phone, and I was like, this is going to be so great, right? And I turned it on, and this was hello. It said, set the date for me, please. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say, nobody ever bought this phone in 1980. Why are you making me scroll through over 30 years to get to where I want to be? Why am I setting the date? Why is that hello? Would you say that as hello to someone? Would you go up to him and say, set the date for me? What date is it? I mean, unless you're like some naked German guy with muscles who's arrived in our time from a different one, that's not going to be your hello. Or if you're this phone. This was a valid error message. Until I realized this, I reinstalled the operating system twice because I was like, there's no way that's a valid error message. There must be a huge problem. And then my friend said, no, it is a valid message. This was the opening screen of their Maps app. Now, if you can't read it, that's okay. Neither could I. The text is too small, right? In fact, in the Maps app itself, there was a button right there in the corner that I have never been able to hit. It became a casual game. Whenever I had a few moments free on a train or something, I'd open it up. I'm like, can I hit the button? I regret to inform you that it was a casual game that I never successfully completed. This was me trying to send a direct message to my girlfriend on Twitter. If you can't see what I'm typing, that's okay. The keyboard is covering it, so neither could I. And finally, this is me trying to get the Train Times website to work. It didn't, which meant that I went to London Bridge Station, not knowing that every train had been cancelled, which blew my mind anyway. And that meant that I got home to my girlfriend 2 hours later than I should have, to my girlfriend and to my dog. And these are the results. These are the impacts of the products that we make. They either improve people's lives and empower them, or they enfeeble them. And they rob them of the most important thing that they have in their lives, experiences. Our lives are a string of experiences, one after the other, whether it's with people or whether it's with things. And the quality of those experiences determine the quality of our lives. So how arrogant for us to say, yes, this phone may empower you in the future, but right now we're going to rob you of those experiences. The experiences we build have to empower people now and in the future. And that's not my only problem with Mozilla, really, to be perfectly honest. They also get 90% of their revenue from, guess who? Google. So if this is a revolution that we need, it's not going to be sponsored by the people that we are revolting against. It's not going to be sponsored by their business models. So Mozilla and Firefox OS are not the answer. Why? Because free and open source today is not equipped organizationally to tackle this problem. They're still living in the age of features. Free and open source today is a sandbox for enthusiasts. It's a beautiful sandbox that you can play in, and if you love technology, then that's great. It's a sponsored sandbox as well. Who sponsors it? 90% of that revenue in Mozilla? Google sponsors it. The current status quo sponsors these beautiful gilded sandboxes. And we operate under this theory of trickle-down technology, which, just like trickle-down economics, doesn't really work. If you're unfamiliar with it, trickle-down economics says if we empower the hugely wealthy to become hugely wealthier, somehow, magically, some of that wealth will also trickle down to other people who need it also. So if you look in the States where this is popular, where 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth, there are still people there who are waiting for things to trickle down. And it's the same with technology, right? We think that if enthusiasts create tools for other enthusiasts, it will also magically trickle down into usable products for consumers. And that's why we spent the last 30 years giving people PCs when all they wanted were iPhones, right? And then, worst of all, we told them they were too stupid to use them, when we were too stupid to make simple enough devices. So it's about experience. And the companies that get experience, Apple, Google, what do they share? They share control over all components of the experience. hardware, software, services, soon connectivity. If we are going to do that, because those comprise the experience, if we're going to create viable alternatives that are free and open, we have to play on the same field. The age of experiences is the age we're living in today. The age of features is dead. One of the companies that makes one of these remotes understands it. And you can see that because their understanding is what reflects in how that remote looks. So traditional free and open source organizations are unequipped for this problem because the solutions we need are consumer solutions. This is a battle that will be fought, lost, or won in the consumer space. We need to create a new category of free and open technology, which can create experience-driven products. And for that, we need design-led organizations. We must design the organization before we can design the product. Because design does not bubble up. It has to trickle down from the top. So today, we have closed organizations that are features-driven, the Microsofts and the Nokias of the world, but we have design-led, experience-driven closed products. But in the free world, we only have features-driven products. We're missing a whole category of technology. Experience-driven, free and open technologies is a missing category. And it's a prerequisite to empower people to own their own data. If we look at the internet today, it is a wasteland of closed silos. And while this might be better than the centralized world that we were living in, it is only decentralized. Decentralized does not mean that it doesn't have centers. Quite the contrary. It means it has a number of centers. What we need to move towards is a distributed topology where there are no centers. And we have to wean people off of the centralized and decentralized networks. Slowly. It's not going to happen overnight. And what are those nodes in a distributed network? Well, those might be personal clouds. But a personal cloud is not a consumer solution. It is just a component. And the actual personal solutions, the consumer solutions, could be a phone, could be a tablet, could be a computer. And they'll have operating systems, but that's not a consumer product. That's just a piece of the equation. I call this independent technology, this new category of technology, or indie tech for short. And indie tech aims to create consumer products that empower you in the whole term, not just the short term, via experiences that could be empowering now, but which are superficial. Not just in the long term at the expense of the short term, but in the whole term. And if you go to indietech.org, you can read the manifesto, you can contribute to it, and we're holding a summit on the 4th of July, the date is ironically chosen, to declare independence. Independence from the venture capital-backed Silicon Valley model, that myopic model that leads to free services, that extremely greedy model of $2 billion exit strategies within 2 years. We don't need that. We can create sustainable businesses that grow organically over time. And we're trying to do just that with the phone. Herb mentioned it at the beginning. We're actually building an operating system. We're actually building a personal cloud. But these two are worthless because they are only components, parts of the solution. We need a third thing, to combine those two in a beautiful experience. And that's why we're building a phone. The hardware, the software, and the services around it to empower people to own their own data. It's called IndiePhone. Now you might ask me why. Aral, why are you doing this? Why aren't you playing in your gilded sandbox? It's so beautiful, and you love it there, and I do, because I love technology. Why are you taking on some of the most powerful corporations in the world today? What's your problem, right? I'm doing this because I want to live in a world where alternatives like this phone and others exist. I want to live in a world where I have alternatives. Because the difference between a world where we have alternatives that allow us to protect our privacy, our civil liberties, and our human rights, and one in which we don't even have those alternatives, is the difference between a world where we enjoy civil liberties and fundamental freedoms and one in which we don't. So yes, free is a lie. The real cost of free is our privacy. The real cost of free are our civil liberties. The real cost of free is our human rights. And I think that that is too high a price to pay. Thank you. Thank you.